We have a quorum,
We do?
so this is an official meeting. And just in case you're not familiar with the Progressive Dems, we are a chartered club of the Solano County Democratic Central Committee. And one of the reasons we formed, we started organizing in January of 17, about 1 week after Trump was elected. One of the principal purposes of the club is to support in the appointment and election of progressive candidates to boards, commissions, and elected offices. So with the quorum, this is the official meeting. Let's see, we're going to do Kathy Carriage, our treasurer, is out of town, so Maggie's going to do the treasurer's report.
Okay, I'll make this real quick. So our beginning balance was $1,524.39. We had $196.89 in deposits. Our withdrawals were $495.99, and that was for the gazebo and the lights for Liberty back in, I guess, August or July. And our library rental was $173, so our balance is $1,225.29. And I'd like to remind you, if you are not currently a member of the Progressive Democrats, for just $20 a year, you can claim membership to this elite organization, the Benicia.
So what I'm going to say is that she was protesting for a year, and it started a movement that has progressed to all these worldwide marches involving youth and everybody, basically. And what has eventually happened is the marches were last week, and they were massive. They were all over the world, and it's spurned to more and more marches. I was driving today and heard there was another march. So people are taking it on themselves to do marches on their own, little individual groups. And so her speech to the United Nations was probably one of the most powerful speeches I've heard, and I urge everybody to go and listen to it. It brought me to tears, because here's a 16-year-old girl calling us out on doing nothing for 30 years. She said, we've had the science, we've had the information, we've known about this, and everybody's pushed it away, and we are now down. This was in her words, we were down to just a few more, really 5 or 7 years, she said. And, nothing's been done, nothing substantial. And so she was calling out all the politicians and telling them, shame on you. She really was very, very emotional. And it just struck me that she was speaking for all of the youth of America, for my daughter, for everybody's kids. And so we really owe it to her and our children to listen to what she said. So I urge everybody to go online. We were going to play it here, but we just don't have the time. And so climate crisis is a crisis, and that's why it's part of the agenda today.
So let me just, before we get into it, both of you guys are running in a primary in March, but I don't think you have any opposition. Is that true?
Not as of yet.
Okay. So we're leaving you off of the endorsement thing altogether. Shouldn't be an issue. What I was going to say about Senator Dodd is, when I first became aware of him, it was back when he first ran in 2016, and at that time, I knew and was endorsing Mariko Yamada, who was running against Bill. And I didn't know Bill. The only thing I knew about him was that he was a supervisor from Napa, and he used to be a Republican. And so I was sort of like set to not like him. Good for that. Well, he got elected.
The only one.
He got elected. And it didn't take long for him to win me over. Bill is a very pragmatic guy. He's not an ideologue. And he's done a lot of what I think is really good work in this community. So it wasn't difficult for me to sort of make that switch over. And I want to thank Bill for the work he's done. Tim, I didn't know as well. He's an ex-mayor of Concord and also elected in 2020. For the first time?
2016.
2016. So
I like your optimism.
Right. So they had a very contentious and productive, I think, year in Sacramento. Bill was sort of the lead person on the old issue of fires and fire safety and the restructuring of PG&E. And given what we know right now, where PG&E is threatening to shut off our power, not necessarily in Benicia, but throughout a big part of Northern California. I'll sort of kick it off and ask why it is that is the solution that PG&E has sort of come to when we have, you know, a high fire probability. We have winds kicking up, and I assume that it's done to sort of protect the community, but it's I think a lot of people who are facing days of no power are like, geez, is this the only thing that we can do? So maybe you can start with that one, if you're willing, and then just sort of talk about a little bit about the whole issue of fire safety and the restructuring of PG&E. Let's start with that if you want.
Well, are we gonna do opening statements first, or are we gonna do questions? I don't care, what, you
I'm
tell
sorry.
me and I'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's allow them to do some opening
Yeah,
comments.
okay, and then
I'll
I'll
jump
put
right
that
in.
in advance.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight. You know what I think is pretty darn impressive is I was here during the campaign 2016, you had a full house. We're here, we're, 6 months out from, or more from March, and here you are, a full house. I've been to a lot of Democratic clubs throughout my district. I have 22 cities and 6 counties. This is an incredibly engaged community. I would never see this many people in 90% of the places that I go to. So I want to pat you on the back and thank you very much for being activists. Because guess what? You get it, because we've got a big job to do. We may have some issues and everything on the state level that we need to discuss, and we'll be discussing those tonight. But we've got a bigger issue of what we've got to do in this country, and it starts at the top. And that just has to happen, because we cannot, for our country, for our state, for our counties, for our cities, for our special districts, we cannot continue, for our humanity, we cannot continue to go down this line. I know I'm preaching. I normally, because that question is really right on, I normally really get to my talking points and not read so much. I've got to do that, because that's all I was doing all day today, is these power shelves. Let me tell you, this company is so screwed up. And what they're doing to people throughout the state of California in 30 counties is just absolutely unconscionable. But we'll get into the specifics of that, so I don't take my time here on that. But one of the things I looked at the Progressive Dem Club, and believe me, that word is being used all over the place. And I said, what is a progressive in 2019? Is it a label we attach ourselves to, or is it how we act? The label I prefer for me, and it doesn't have to be you, the label I prefer for me is modern. You might have heard that. I will always listen to every side and be open-minded, and as Steve said, I'm not an ideologue. I'm not. But my votes are definitely progressive. The Sierra Club gave me a 90% rating last year. The Cal Labor Federation gave me a 96%. I support progressive goals, but to me, they just seem like common sense. It's not like I had to get somewhere. They're common sense. It's common sense to support universal child care. We know it reduces the burden on working parents, mostly women, and produces better outcomes later in life. It's common sense to support clean energy. I was proud to stand by Governor Brown last year at the UN Climate Summit as he signed SB 100 into law. California is leading the way on 100% renewable energy. And there are governments that are doing something about climate change, and we're going to continue to do that in the state of California. It's common sense to mandate that your companies, the companies that collect your personal data, disclose what they have, and every time they use or lose that information. We did that with the Consumer Privacy Act. I was proud that one of my bills was combined into that, that final package. In 2019, I was glad to support AB 857, setting up the framework for California to approve public banks. I never had a chance to vote on 1080, the plastics bill. We should talk about that, though, tonight, because it'll be back again next year. California needs a complete reboot of our entire recycling program. Recycling centers are shutting down all over the place, and China isn't taking our crap anymore. This is a global problem, but we can't wait for the rest of the world to solve it. It's an imperative for us right now, and if we don't do something right now, we lose our communities. The cities and counties are paying, money, and people are paying fees for this, and we can't go backwards and stop those programs. Something's got to be done post haste. It's common sense to leave the world a better place for the next generation. And as that old proverb goes, we don't inherit, the world from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. And so with that in mind, that's really, that philosophy above all else is what guides me in my votes. I've got 5 kids, and we're just so fortunate to have 9 grandkids. And I try to look at things, what is this world gonna look like when these kids, get to the point where, they're old like me, and they have kids and grandkids. It's a pretty scary thing, but I know this club is passionate about the environment and environmental issues, and I was proud to support AB 936, which is just common sense again, steps to make oil spills less likely. We cannot continue to risk these. We will have less of that oil being shipped as we implement the goals of SB 100. We're going to get to where we need to be with big oil, with carbon, by following the policy that the state of California has. And this is just the first step to fighting climate change. The next thing we need to do is reorient how our communities are planned. And I'm a huge fan of transit-oriented development. I was a chairman of MTC for 2 years. I was on the MTC for 14 years, and I've supported that policy for over a decade. And we've allocated over hundreds of millions of dollars to these type of housing and transit, which go together. We've got to find more ways to get people out of their vehicles, and we're not being as successful as we need to. I think we see that every day. But we can't manage what we can't measure. My bill from this year, SB 19, mandates the state set up stream gauges on every waterway in the state of California. Mayor Patterson helped me with this bill and came and testified there. This is incredibly important for us to get precise. We have water fights, even our Democrats. Kamala Harris, Dianne Feinstein, one was for SB 1. Our President Pro Tem, Tony Atkins, had this bill that I voted for that I thought was sound for water policy in the state of California. But unfortunately, the governor sided with Senator Feinstein, and we're kind of back to square one on that. But my bill, what it does, we need more information to help so that they have positive data to be able to show. A lot of these data points we have are nebulous. So if we're monitoring every single stream and river in the state of California, not only does that help us with our management of our water supplies, coming out of the Delta to farmers, to communities, but it also helps us with flood control, because we're monitoring that data, how much water is coming down these things, and we know by the time it gets to these points that usually flood, that's data that can help us right now. So that's just common sense there as well. But it also is working in concert to combat climate change as well, because if we manage our water better, we don't need to get more and build more conveyance systems and everything that emit carbon. That's better for the environment. Our state budget included $134.3 million for county to replace age voting systems. You kind of talked a little bit about that earlier. Fully leveraged by a match from counties, which will result in $268 million being spent on voting machines in the state of California. Pretty pleased with that. This is the first significant funding towards voting systems in California in 15 years. Alex Padilla, our Secretary of State, is an amazing Secretary of State, and I call my friend and really support him. We need secure elections, but more importantly, we need, as I said earlier, a new president. I endorse Kamala Harris. Yeah, let's get I endorsed Kamala Harris and was at her kickoff in Oakland. It was amazing. I don't, how many other people went to that? Anybody go to that? No? Well, anyway, she still has plenty of time, as all the candidates do. It's very early, but, you know, I figure, you know, I'm a pretty loyal guy, and I've known her a long time. She endorsed me, and, you know, if you don't think that it's true, in terms of there's plenty of time left, I think at this time, long ago, Rudy Giuliani was leading in the polls for the Republican president. Thank God that never happened. So anyway, we need, in closing, again, I just want to thank you very much for your advocacy. I want to thank you for having us here so that we can talk about some of these issues. We may not agree on every single issue, but what I can tell you is we are going to agree on probably more than 95%. And I think as Democrats, going into this new election, what we got to do is we've got to find the things that are common denominators, as I said earlier, and that's defeating Trump. And for my money, the candidate that we pick as a Democrat in the United States of America is going to be my candidate, regardless. So I want to thank you all for your time and attention. Look forward to the questions and answers.
Thank you. Assemblymember Tim Grayson, and thoroughly enjoy working with Senator Dodd as a partner on the Assembly side, and he's serving very capably on the Senate side. I think one of the things that all of us are ever too familiar with right now in the state of California is the crisis of affordability. And all of us are hit, whether you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to do business in California, or whether you're a stakeholder and you've been doing business in California a long time. But even more so, I think the issue that's pressing all of us in our communities is homelessness and affordability of housing and putting a roof over your head. And for some of us, we're established, but for others of us, my children, I'm scratching my head trying to figure out how are they gonna be able to afford to live here in California. It's a big issue to me because I don't want to have to get on an airplane to go see my grandchildren when I have them someday. Not yet. I don't want to push that envelope too fast. But I want my children to be able to have the choice and the liberty to be able to stay and live where they've been raised. And so housing is an issue that has become top priority to me this past year, and it will remain an issue for me for this entire session, going into the second year of this session. Just today, with the governor in Oakland, signed AB 1482, which was an anti-rent gouging bill and a tenant protection bill. So that bill is signed into law now, and we look forward to the benefits of that bill to make sure that people are not overwhelmed with rent increases. Rent increases can still take place. As a matter of fact, to prove to you we did it in a fair manner, at least I believe we did it in a justified and fair manner, is that one of our allies and one of the people that helped sponsor this at the very end was the California Apartment Association, along with the Building Industry Association, along with the Business Roundtable Association. So we brought all the players, along with Western Center for Law and Poverty and the advocates for the renters. We're all at the table, as well as the labor and trades. So everybody was at the table, everybody got a piece of the pie as far as being able to have their input, and that bill will help make a difference. And it will help protect, but that's not all there is to the housing crisis. There's the protection part of it, which I think is the smaller of them all. You have the preservation to make sure that the current existing inventory isn't gentrified, it's not thrown out, it's not exchanged, affordable housing for market rate, and we lose out on affordable, but that it's preserved. But I think the thing that is really pressing us, that I believe needs to be top priority for us and the legislator going into this second year of a 2-year session, is production. Econ 101 makes it really clear. that supply and demand. The thing is it's how we get to that supply, to make sure that we not only address affordable housing, which many of us want to be able to help, especially those that are homeless, but it's housing that's affordable. It's for the workforce, those that are actually making or getting a paycheck. But the fact is that paycheck that they're getting is not meeting the needs for the cost of living in our state. It's causing people to look for jobs that are 2 hours away. And I'll address that here in just a minute about our environment and what that's doing to our environment, to where people are in 2-hour commutes, stuck on a road. Mobile emissions are literally going through the roof of our sky. So I think addressing the type of housing development that is on every affordable level, from the top market rate all the way down to that of the lowest as far as affordable housing, and to be able to put the right mixture in the right place at the right time. So with that, we will continue, or I will continue to work really hard this coming year as I stated, on production, working with all the stakeholders, bringing in all the people. As a matter of fact, I'll be hosting meetings on this very topic in San Diego, Los Angeles, Fresno, this Bay Area, as well as Sacramento, all between now and the time we start back in January. And so going on a California tour for housing to make sure that we do it, but we do it right, so that it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're not jamming housing down everybody's throat in a way that you're forced to take on the same kind of a load that LA is or that Fresno is, but that what we come up with fits your community, and that local control is preserved in our efforts to provide the housing that's needed. I think there's something else that's important, is to make sure that as we deal with the affordability crisis, that we take care of our underserved in our communities. And one of the ways that our underserved were being exploited was through small dollar lending. I'm not talking about payday loans, that's up to $300, but I'm talking about small dollar lending from $2,600 up to $10,000. And those weren't rich people going and getting those loans. Those are folks that are living paycheck to paycheck, and their car breaks down, and they can't afford even that extra $400 repair. So they go to get this type of a loan, and they're talked into a loan of $2,600. And that the reason for that is because the provider of that loan is going to make anywhere between 200 to 300% on that loan. So when you take out a $2,600 loan, you're paying back almost $14,000 in repayment of that loan. So almost $12,000 in interest. It was exploiting people who are already in a crisis. So I joint authored AB 539 with a wonderful Assemblymember Limon, and we're looking forward to that bill being signed in Sacramento on Thursday. And that will limit these type of loans to 36% with a few little additives that would put it in a 40% maximum range. That's still ridiculously high. But when you compare it to the 200 to 300% that they were paying, this will provide them the relief that they need to be able to get emergency money in the event that something happens in their lives. Something else that's very important, I think that it affects all of our communities. It's fire and police. In 2017, more firemen committed suicide than died in the line of duty. And it's because of mental health issues of their cup. My son is working to be a fireman. And just the other day, he calls me, and his first, as a reserve firefighter, his first call out was to a motorcycle accident on the freeway, which was catastrophic, fatal. And after the call was done, he called his mother, and then he called Dad. Dad, because I'm a chaplain for the Concord Police Department, and I'm used to dealing with crisis. And the first thing he started doing was diffusing. Well, the problem is there's a stigma with mental health, and there's a stigma that comes when someone reaches out and says, I need help. I need to talk to somebody. They feel like their job could be in jeopardy. They feel like they aren't strong enough. Well, this bill will allow the confidentiality that's needed between trained peer support personnel and that firefighter. That bill was signed this last week by the governor, and I'm happy to announce that the police, the sister bill to that is for police, which God knows our police need to be able to be at the best mental health level that they can be at when they're out on the streets. And we're looking forward to having the governor sign that bill this week as well. Supported SB 100 because it brought us to 100% as far as being able, well, let me talk about three things as far as the climate crisis that we're facing. The three things that are top priority, and then I'll go in detail each one. Number one was the change in land use patterns. Number two was supporting investments in decarbonization. And number three was being able to reduce the impact of catastrophic wildfires. Let's go back to the first one as far as the change that's absolutely necessary in our land use patterns. I joined authored last year AB 2923, and the purpose of that bill was to focus on transit-oriented development, TOD development. And the whole thing is being able to put people who are willing and want to into higher type development, but closer to mass transit. In other words, in this particular case, it provided for our BART system to be able to develop land that is within a half mile of their gate that they own, to be able to develop for housing specifically and to be able to go up higher. Local control was a concern to me, so that we made sure that we brought in cities, and I brought in every single city by invite to come and speak at the Capitol in a forum and let us know their concerns, so that local control was preserved as much as we could possibly preserve it, and also partnering with BART. Again, it's about that not having policy that's one size fits all, but being able to provide housing that is needed. So AB 2923 was signed into law, and some of the critics were saying we're going to have high rises, 20 stories, right by single family homes in BART land. And I'm glad to tell you that that's not the case. And communities, cities are working closely with BART, and it's really developing into what I believe will be a pilot program for throughout the whole state. So it's land use. It's being able to bring jobs to where people live, and it's being able to put mass population closer to mass transit so that we can reduce our mobile emissions, and so that we can help people. It's multifaceted. Number one, we help our environment by reducing the number of people on roads, by reducing the mobile emissions that are impacting our environment. But then also, if we have the ability to bring jobs to where people live, that means their commute has been cut down exponentially, which means those hours are returned back to their life. It improves the quality of life for us who live in California and expect to have a certain level of quality of life. So as far as environment, being able to look at our land use, make sure it's on a local control level, but make sure that that land use is being, planning is being done in a certain way that puts people and jobs together so people can live, work, and play all in the same area. Quickly, I'm going to hurry. All right. The second thing was supporting investments, supporting SB 100 right along with my colleague in the Senate, and then reducing impact of catastrophic wildfires. The thing that's concerning as far as that goes is that PG&E is so quickly willing to turn off the power. But the fact is that for many years they have been paying out high dividends and profits to our New York Wall Street investors. They've been paying out high bonuses to their executives, and their infrastructure has gone unkept. And now we get to pay the price for it. One of the answers that I felt would be necessary would be to, and we did a bill last year that got signed into law, was prescribed fires. And that is a way for there to be fires that are actually set on purpose, but they're prescribed. And it would help balance the liability and all that, but to help clear out areas of underbrush and clear out areas where the lines are, so that if a line did fall, it wouldn't fall on fuel. It would fall on land that had already been prescribed burned, and there wouldn't be that risk, so that you and I could keep our power that we're actually paying for.
Thanks, Tim.
So I want to, we only got about 20 minutes for questions and answers. I want to acknowledge another of my council colleagues who came in at the end, Tom Campbell, in the back. So there's now 4 of us here, so we will not be talking about any city-related stuff tonight. We advertised this as partly to hear from Senator Dodd and Assemblyman Grayson, but we also said we want to talk about PG&E and the wildfire stuff. And Senator Dodd was sort of the leader on this, so maybe you can give us just a few minutes on where we are with that.
Yeah, we've got, I just was in the governor's office last week on Wednesday, I believe. Time goes by so fast. With the signing ceremony, I had 4 of my bills that were signed, 22 of them, all in total were signed. And you know, none of these bills all by themselves are magic bullets.
Right.
You know, that's one thing, and you know, now's no time to get a pat on the back, attaboy for doing this. We have a lot of work to do. But we did get a lot done, and we are making California safer. You know, these PSPSs were all part of the plan. This first happened in San Diego. San Diego Gas and Electric started major fires in 2007 down there. They were horrific. At the time, they were the largest fires in the state of California history. And they started these PSPSs on their own.
And that is
Public safety power shutoffs. And they did it on they had to get permission from the CPUC to do it. And they had 18 of them in like the first 10 years. In the last 2 years, I think they've had 1. So what's happened is they've gotten to work in trimming their trees. As Jim outlined what's gone on, we have had no culture of safety at PG&E in the boardroom or in the executive suite. It is just an embarrassment. How this has happened is beyond me. The fact that this year they've only done 30% of the prescribed tree trimming that they were supposed to do, this is why we have this thing. And today, I was just, at 7 o'clock, we had an emergency Democrat senators caucus, and I got allowance because I was here. But I had already told the pro tem what I was feeling about it. But you know, when we have 30 counties that are doing, they don't even have cooling centers in 10 of the counties. I mean, it's just unconscionable. So, you know.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but at 7 o'clock tonight, Solano Alert announced that the power may be down for 5 days, and they may close down the Caldecott Tunnel for 5 days.
Well, hang on. Senator Glazer just called me today before they got the emergency power for the ventilators in the Caldecott Tunnel. First of all, we got to understand something. When we had the North Bay fires, and I had 56 of my neighbors in my subdivision that lost their homes. We've had over 10,000 people actually statewide now with the campfires that have lost their homes. We've had 122 lost lives because of PG&E, most of them. Now, they weren't responsible for the Tubbs fires, I guess, but that's still going to go through the court process. But nevertheless, we cannot trust PG&E to do it on their own. They can't even do this right. So the bottom line is this is a cost that we're going to have to pay because our utility system today is not safe enough to leave it to PG&E. Sorry. It's going to get better. We're going to continue working. We've got more controls and fines. But what's coming up next that we're all going to find, because we got to hurry through this, sorry, Steve. But on PG&E's restructuring, it's terrible. This is, New York, and you look at, I'm not against New York companies or corporations or anything else. I let them determine their behavior to me. And I don't believe the PG&E is going to survive this one themselves. The shareholders, right now, the way the plans are, they're going to get buried. But what we got to remember is most of the shareholders that were the type of guys that we don't care if they get buried have already sold their interest off to bondholders and others, hedge funds that are just looking for more profits, thinking that betting that PG&E was going to end up winning that war. And so there's just the hedge funds that are there. And then on the other side, we have the bondholders that stand to lose something on the order of $122 billion in bond holdings if they don't get control of the company, because if PG&E through the bankruptcy, theirs is not guaranteed, so they don't get their money back. So they're offering to give this major package, infusion of $40 billion into PG&E to pay off all the victims and to make a new company. And what's probably going to happen is they're going to sell it to Warren Buffett. There's going to be a new company called, who knows what it is, California Power, whatever. And guess what? All those hedge funds that are on that side that put all the money in, they're going to walk away with millions. It's just disgusting. And but we've talked about public power, and and I think that we've got to do more on our maybe microgrids. These CCAs are turning out to be, I think, an asset that we can use in a lot of these areas. But Rome wasn't built overnight, and we've got to look at incrementalism. Isn't always our friend. I get that, but this is going to be one of those that we're going to have to settle and keep it moving. Don't pat us on the back for what we've done the last 2 years. Kick us in the ass to keep us working up there to make sure that we do more. Sorry, young man, for that profanity. I apologize.
So we got 10 or 15 minutes on questions, so I assume we're going to have more than that. If your question doesn't get answered, as Ralph said, or Maggie said earlier, write out your question and say whether it's to Senator Dodd or Assemblyman Grayson. We'll get it to them and their staffs, and they will get an answer to you if you don't get asked tonight. So let's just open it up for questions. We'll start with Constance.
Assembly Member Grayson. Prescribed burns is an inadequate response to PG&E's ineptitude. I worked for a public utility. It happened to be Pacific Bell for many years, and it's just untenable that PG&E's response is to turn off the power. So I think the Assembly and the Senate, Senator Dodd, really have to work on how do we, besides microgrids, besides incrementally, how do we provide continuous, sustainable energy to California? I mean, it's just 5 days of tunnels and no electricity to run businesses and hospitals, people on ventilators. I mean, it's just, we can't run our economy without energy.
Yeah, well, I'll take that as a question.
No,
Okay.
as an urge for action, because prescribed burns by whomever is not right. PG&E has antiquated equipment, as you say, and has not done the work that they need to do. They need, whoever is now going to be running this utility has to step up to it and get it done, and get it done immediately, because it's
I agree
untenable.
wholeheartedly, absolutely, and I also think that the Utilities Committee on both the Senate side and the Assembly should do a joint hearing as far as holding PG&E's feet to the fire, and do an oversight hearing of the PUC as well.
Real quick, these are the worst possible scenarios, and this is just, to me, it's sleazy that they just don't come out and say this. They're coming out and saying now 800,000 people. This morning it was what? Quarter of a million or something like that. And so they're continuing to move the needle. 5 days there's no way it's going to be 5 days, but that's what they're just trying. I don't know what it is. They're playing games, but it's not going to be anywhere near as bad as we think, but it's just disgraceful the way it's being rolled out.
Right. Okay. Bart.
Yes, I'm an electrical engineer. I worked at PG&E many years ago. And there are solutions that the upper management does not want to address. So my question to you is, why can't the government step in now, take control of PG&E, set up an engineering division in PG&E to address these issues? Because I can guarantee the management does not even understand how electricity works.
That's pretty sad.
I don't think you want the state of California owning this utility. There's maybe only one entity that might be able to do a worse job than PG&E. Let me just tell you, running a utility is a tough gig. The state of California, we do not want that liability. That liability is so high, and to put put those liabilities on the whole rest of this. We talked about it, believe me, we've talked about it. But I'm telling you, we're doing other things by putting their feet to the fire. We're not gonna let them have any of the money, for backstops for these type of things, because they need financial backstops. You need a financially healthy utility in order to keep your rate base low, or as low as could be. It's not low, but so at any rate, we put their feet to the fire. They're not going to be able to access that money until they get their act together and start doing the tree trimming. But make no mistake about it, this PSBS was it's not just PG&E's idea. Look, we own this. We absolutely own it. This is something, when you look at the events that happened in the campfire, what the costs are to local communities throughout the state of California, plus what the costs are to victims and everything, and ratepayers at the end of the day, this is something we're gonna have to live with, but as I said before, we got a lot of work to do.
Real quick, just for point of information for everybody in here, if power goes out and you don't have power, and I know that the website for PG&E is down, hasn't been working, which is even more frustrating. There is a regional center in Fairfield where you can go direct. Also at the fairgrounds. Well, there is also one at the Fairfield, but also at the fairgrounds here, where you'll be able to charge up battery items or get the information that you need. So look toward the county. County website should have a lot of information as well.
This is addressed to both of you. I'm under the impression, you're talking about tree trimming is the problem. I'm under the impression it's faulty equipment. It's lines that are not secure, it's transformers that are outdated or broken. Why aren't you able to focus on that rather than just trimming the trees? I think trimming the trees is
Well, we are. It is clearly both. I mean, it is clearly both. The tree trimming is most of it. But we also have to understand climate change has a big role here as well. We've had these fires. I lived in Napa my whole life. When I was 9 years old, we experienced the same fire pattern from Napa all the way over to Santa Rosa. That whole event took 7 to 8 days. This event took 8 hours or something like that, and then continued to spread. We have, because of climate change, because of our drought, and then years and years of way over rains, our fuels are at unbelievable levels. In addition to that, for all the good reasons, some of our environmental laws went too far. And I'm not criticizing anybody, but you know what? When a property owner that wants to have a healthy forest on his land to make sure that it's fire secure, they have to go to their local county and spend $50,000, $100,000 and take 2 years with environmental impact reports in order to do that is ridiculous. So we were able to get that changed but not from the standpoint, you can't go out clear cut or do any of those things. We understand those are sacred rules and regulations. But we can do a better job, and we're going, but it is both. And what we need to do is have these coated wires. That may be the next thing. I'm looking at running a bill, and again, it's incremental because they don't have the manpower. There's not enough tree trimming companies in the state of California to do the backlog of work. And I'm not making excuses for them. Again, I say it's disgraceful. But they need to start working right now and have a 10-year plan, or hopefully it can be 5, but I don't, they've got 56,000 miles of lines. So to put these coated lines, maybe what we do in the WUI in those areas, we get that done, but we got to get it done quicker. You got a comment?
A few more. Pat.
This is for both of you. Do you agree with Governor Newsom's call to stop any new fracking in California? The concerns are increased methane releases, earthquake risks, and air and groundwater pollution. For both of you guys.
I voted on the bill that would give Dodd more authority over fracking, and I think that the way that's working right now is fine for me.
Department of Oil and Gas.
Thank you, Department. Thank you. But they really never had the teeth. Governor Brown went in there and completely cleaned house We took off, you know, in essence, of some of these regulatory authorities, they've had really pro-industry people working for them for years. And it's like the fox guarding the hen house. I really believe that where we're at right now is we're in a good place. We're not allowing, new ones, but the ones that are up and operating, until demand ceases, until our policies get to where they're going to be, I just don't see any move to do anything more in that area this time.
And to go along with that, I think the one thing that the senator hit on was the policies. And this is another one of those incremental things. So we have some really strong policies going all the way, not all the way back, just a couple of years ago to SB 100 and other policies that are coming forward and pushing us and really moving the dial for California to get to a fossil-free environment as far as electricity and energy. So I think we're headed there. It's
So
just,
do you agree, though, with what he said, no new fracking in California? When he first was elected?
I think we're supportive of it, yes.
Yeah, that's, okay.
Yeah, we're supporting the governor.
Okay, thank you.
So one from the audience to Senator Dodd, it could be for both of you. What steps are being taken to address the growing homelessness and food insecurity issues?
Probably one of the most, that issue is now the PPIC poll that just came out is the #1 issue for Californians. And we get all these San Francisco bills that come in, and look, and I respect Scott Wiener is a good colleague of mine from San Francisco, and David Chu. I served in the assembly, what was it, 3 years ago, I guess, with him, and they're both, housing chairman, and they're doing a great job. But, I've seen Art Agnos, and I've seen Willie Brown, and I've seen Gavin Newsom, and I've seen Ed Lee, and now I'm seeing London Breed. And what are their policies? How much money's been spent there? And so I'm really frustrated that we're trying to maybe regurgitate these same policies that haven't worked. I'm really, really turned on to London Breed's comments. If we're gonna solve the problem, and I'm not an expert in this area, and that's one of the things, politicians generally are jack of all trades and masters of none. We may have, like, water's some of my thing, and now energy. God, I never thought on October 8th that I'd ever know as much as I do about that. But we learn it. This is something that, we can no longer be as politically correct. I remember Democrats were furious with Ronald Reagan for decimating the mental health establishments that we had. But yet Democrats today, many of us say no institutionalized. That's a horrible word. Even conserving people that can't help themselves. We've got people dying on the street. And we got to come to grips in this political stuff that we can't do that. What we're going to do, though, is as Democrats, we're going to do it more humanely. We're not going to conserve them for life. We're trying to get people out. Drug and alcohol, I mean, that is, LA Times did a thing, and I'll let you, 76% of the people have a mental issue that are on the street in LA, and they're pulled in. Go ahead.
So to build, no, he set it up perfectly. To build on what Senator's saying is that when we do the affordable housing, and we also have housing for where we plan on helping the homeless, it's not just putting a roof over their head, it's making sure that we make an investment to have wraparound services. And one of the things I did as mayor of Concord was worked in partnership with the county because they're public health. And we worked with county to make sure that we put a therapist that was qualified and educated to assess on the spot. We put that therapist into the front seat of a police car. That officer's whole job was to do nothing but seek out homeless. And they would literally assess them, and instead of 5150ing them to only be out on the street in 72 hours, they were actually sending them to the services and the places that they would get what they needed in mental health. And it has proven to be incredibly effective. I think investing in local communities, they know what the issue is in their community, and making sure that we get professionals with mental health expertise out on the streets and do wraparound service with our housing.
All right, let's do one more. This lady here.
Yeah, I'm a bit biased on this as a therapist before retirement for 30-odd years. However, I don't think it's just, I honestly don't, I don't think it's just the people that you're talking about. I mean, clearly that's necessary, okay? But it is a stigma against depression as a medical problem, which it is. Also, when we had that terrible collapse years ago, the National Guard was literally pulling these partial bodies out. These people had nowhere to go for processing at first they did. But I think that's equally important. And the last thing on that same level is, and it was many, many years ago, so no one, confidentiality, right? I'm not blowing anything, but there was a prison guard that I saw at St. Quentin. And it's not, I don't think the public, we can't limit this to people who have a public face, right? Because certainly these guys don't. But again, it's just as you were saying, it's not cool. It's not macho, it's not okay. And he was afraid of that becoming a problem, becoming known. So if we could really, and I agree with you, just make mental health more available, therapists, more available, and not just to those in the public view, but those who are working kind of behind. I think
Incentivize.
it's, yeah, I just think it would be a nice
Thank
thing.
you for that comment. Yes, 100%.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next part. I want to thank Senator Dodd and Assemblyman Grayson